Hey guys, welcome to Deep Dive, where we dive deep into Sunday's message. I have Pastor Allen here. I'm gonna ask him some questions, and we'll go a little further into the message from Sunday. Really enjoyed Break in Case of Loss. You've had this in your heart for a while. Like I know you've been talking about this for longer than just like a week or so. What brought it up in you?
I thought we really need to give people some things that they can lock into in the event that their side loses. Somebody's going to lose.
Yeah.
And so how do you handle it? But really, it's not just how to lose, it's how to win.
Yeah.
Because if you get snarky and nasty when you win,
You can lose a witness.
we're going to lose some things. Yeah.
You've had a platform from the beginning of not talking politics at all.
Right.
And you've received love and hate for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you give people a background on why?
I came back to the Lord in the fall of 1981. And I'd been away from the Lord. I came back and really committed my life to the Lord in 1981. Around first part of 1982, I began to sense, or around that time frame, that God had called me to be a preacher. And so I actually had known this for years, just never acknowledged it.
Really?
And so I knew it when I was in college. After parties, I was well known for asking deep philosophical questions, like, where are you going to be in 15 years? So my two good friends in college, one of them I'm still in touch with, I said, where are you guys going to be in 15 years? One of them said, I'm going to be a businessman working in corporate America. One said, I'm going to have my own business. They said, what are you going to be doing? I said, 15 years, I bet I'll be preaching. And so we'd been partying all night. So they're all like, yeah, you're just 15 years, all of us were right.
Wow.
Every one of us was right. So I knew I was going to be a preacher. I'm driving down the road. I'd been reading in Luke, the 4th chapter, where Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach the good news to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. So I'd been thinking about that scripture. Well, I'm listening to, I think it was KSBJ or KJOJ. It was a Christian radio station, which in the 80s, you have to understand, was like cutting edge. It's like, wow, Christian radio station. Well, there's a preacher on. So I think it was KJOJ. There's a preacher on, and his name was Phil Arms. I'll never forget him. He was a pastor, but he's more of an evangelist, fiery guy. And he is laying into it politically. And so, man, he is just tromping all over it politically. And I'm on the Gulf Freeway. I'm in my car. I was a sales rep. I'm in Gulf Freeway. I'm riding down the road, and the Lord spoke to my heart very clearly. He said, do you notice? He reminded me of that Luke passage. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He said, you notice there's no anointing to preach politics. He said, stay away from politics. And so I have stayed away from, I have been obedient to that heavenly revelation. For years, much to the chagrin of some people who think it's my job to tell people how to vote.
Or to use your
or use my platform.
And we've had people want to come and hold rallies, political rallies, who we've liked, and we've said no. And they've been great individuals, even. And
right.
So I know that's a big and I definitely appreciate that. So it's a
because
it's
the thing about it is. When the Lord called us to pastor a church here, he gave us a spiritual voice in this community. I cannot compromise that to gain a political voice. It's not worth it.
And I mean, and you and I have talked about this, Jesus never came preaching politics, and he had every opportunity to.
Totally.
And they tried to catch him in politics on a regular basis, and he never fell in it.
Render to Caesar.
And so at the same time, you look at, you talked a lot about as a follower of Christ, I'm to follow Jesus. If you follow his example, he stayed away out of politics at a time when they were very tumultuous within Jerusalem.
Jesus said something when he faced Pilate, and he said, Pilate said, are you a king? This is right before his crucifixion. He said, I am. He said, but my kingdom is not of this world. He said, if my kingdom was of this world, my servants would fight, and I would not be delivered to you. And so he already established right there, he is a king. He is in a higher kingdom. And that's the kingdom my allegiance is to first. So I am a believer and part of his kingdom before I am an American, before I am a Texan.
North Carolinian.
No, that's what I am first.
Before your heritage.
Totally.
I think that's something that maybe has been lost a little bit on America. I think America's been is a great country. It's an amazing country. I've lived in other countries. It's 1,000 times better.
Totally.
And I think God's blessed America for years. But one of the things you talked about too was how church attendance has gone down in America.
Yeah.
And
that's a bad drop to 20% in the last 20
which is
18
wild.
years.
It's like almost with like that drop, and I think it's even dropped more recently.
Totally.
If you take in effect
Totally.
the last 5 years, it's even been a more drastic drop.
Is that?
What do you think is going on? What's your opinion on
The
that?
simple answer is that you have more darkness, more deception, and more people turning away from God. Now, the church, and when I speak of the big church, not the ark, but the big church, I don't think we've done a good job in reaching the lost. We've got a very divided in our theology, and there's just so many different flavors, and so we could talk about that for way too long.
Yeah.
But we haven't done our job. But it's coupled with the fact that you have people moving away from God.
Yeah.
So I think it's a function of the last days
Yeah.
that we're living in.
Yeah.
And so we've been a comfortable Christian nation for a long time, and I think those days are ending.
And with those days ending, we have to be uncomfortable in Christianity.
It's going to come.
And, something kind of referencing back to our kingdom is not of this world. When Paul and Peter would talk to the early church that was being persecuted, they would call them pilgrims and sojourners in this land. This idea of like,
Temporary.
you're temporary here. Yeah. Like you don't belong. You're in this world, but you're not of this world.
It's a temporary deal. You're right.
How does the church correct, or what does that look like for our church to get, if we're seeing the world, as we're seeing church attendance decline, what do you feel like the Lord's calling this church to do?
It's a great question. I really think that the emphasis is going to be more on what I talked about today was mission, is that we have to focus on what is our mission, what are we called to do, and we're called for the saving of households. We're called to reach people. So I really believe that the emphasis is because there's not the social pressure to go to church as much.
Yeah.
Used to be, where'd you go to church? You don't go to church? Oh, you're part of the minority. Well, now that's become more and more now you're becoming the minority if you do.
Yeah.
So I really think the issue is, hey, I don't go to church just to check a box. I don't go to church just to make social contacts.
Yeah.
I go to church because I want to honor God in my life. I want to learn to live with Him, grow stronger, and I want to be able to make a difference.
Yeah.
Because eventually, the biggest thing is, eventually the Bible says we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And we don't preach that a lot because it's not a comfortable message.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to give an account for the things we do. So I think as things get darker, our reason for being in church needs to become bigger, or people can just kind of drift back into, it doesn't matter. It's like, no, it matters.
Yeah, and especially after the pandemic where church was shut down.
Totally.
And people have gotten, even though our worlds have changed a lot, I think people have gotten a lot comfortable with certain things they weren't as comfortable with this before.
Sure.
And even companies are realizing, hey, we don't need to have people come to the office anymore. Hey, I can do this, I can do that. And so for church, it's like, well, I didn't go to church for a while. It's harder to come to church sometimes.
Oh, well, yeah. And I think it's time that we tell people coming to church is more difficult. It requires more effort. Serving requires more effort.
Yeah.
Giving, and so I think where this will go is where we really begin to take Jesus' words seriously, where He said, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. And so because we've not had a lot of additional pressure on the outside, I don't think that part of it has been preached as much. Now, in countries where they're persecuted, that's a reality to them. If you make Jesus your Lord, you're going to have to take up your cross.
Yeah.
You could lose family. You could lose that. I don't think we're at that stage yet, but we are at the stage where if you take a stand for Christ, all those who will live godly will suffer persecution.
What does it mean to deny yourself?
Well, basically, when you're talking about denying yourself, you're really kind of denying it's your flesh that you're denying. The Bible talks about three things. It talks about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And so lust of the flesh is the passions and desires we have for our flesh. That could be for alcohol. That could be for sex. It could be for drugs. It could be for lust of the eyes is material things. It's what I have. The pride of life is the showiness of the haughtiness of life. And so when you're denying yourself, it's one of these areas, and people have their areas, but something is you're going to have to say no to.
Yeah.
If I'm going to serve the Lord, I'm going to say no to spending all the money on myself, and I'm going to give
Yeah.
I'm going to be a giver.
Yeah.
Well, that's denying yourself.
Yeah.
If I'm going to serve,
Yeah.
I'm going to say no to an ease, the very most convenient, easiest Sunday possible.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I'm going to do something for the kingdom of God. That's denying yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming to church, in a certain sense, is a sense of denying yourself.
Yeah. Serving is denying yourself. Giving is. Yeah. You told me something, I think it was an article you sent me that I really liked. And the language was a little strong. But it said, if it doesn't suck, it's not worth it. If it doesn't suck, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And that's a phrase
that will not be a sermon.
That will not be a sermon, but if it's not hard, it's not worth it, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think there's an element of that the things that are worth it the most require effort. It's hard. And there's a litmus test. Is this difficult or hard? Yes, then it's probably worth it.
Well, think about it. Having a good marriage is not easy.
Yeah.
Raising kids, good kids, is not easy.
Staying at jobs sometimes is not easy when the Lord's called you to a place.
Going on a diet, doing, there's so many things in life that are not easy, but the end goal is good. And so I think as a church, we're going to have to start looking at this. Hey, this is not as easy as it used to be.
Church was not made to be easy.
Yeah.
Or Christian life wasn't made. Good and easy good and difficult can still can coexist.
I agree, and I think even the idea that sometimes doing a workout is not easy, but after the workout you feel so much better.
Yeah.
And long range, when your health is better, you feel so much better.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same thing. The Bible talks about exercise yourself toward godliness.
Prophets
For bodily exercise profitable for a little time. Godliness it'll profit you in this life and the one to come. We don't talk enough about the one to come. We only focus on this one, but there is one to come.
Yeah. And when you have that mission mindset, and I love what you said. I wrote down purpose trumps petty. When you have a purpose and a mission, the petty things in life you can easily throw away.
Can you use the word trumps?
Sorry, I didn't mean to get political. Trumps is a word that we used to use all the time. I have one more question.
Okay.
Well, let me give 2 more questions, and then we'll. I really liked the part that you were talking about. I love the artist, the present. I thought that was a really great.
Interesting one.
And you talked a lot about how people have raw emotions and there's strained relationships.
Yeah.
What if my own emotions are raw? How do I get over hurt? Or what if my own or if I have strained relationships? What are some of the ways that I can get healing in my emotions and heal some relationships?
Yeah, I don't think that you're looking at healing as a short-term thing. I think that's a long-term thing.
Yeah.
But you need to begin to put His Word and have a relationship with Him. A relationship with Him is healing. So the closer I get to Him, the closer I am to the healer. And He can speak to me about areas, or maybe areas that I've created some of my own hurt. Or if other people have hurt you, He can help calm that. I think He says in Psalms, Isaiah 51, where He said, God speaking, He said, I am He who comforts you. He said, who are you to be afraid of a man who will die, or the son of a man who will be made like grass? And you forget the Lord your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth. So I think sometimes we forget that God is our Maker, and He's the one that can comfort us. So a relationship with Him is key. Yeah. And that would be a place. The other one I talked a little bit about today is we commit ourselves to Him who judges righteously. Yeah. Sometimes we get misjudged. Sometimes we get people say things that are wrong, and we have to do it like Jesus did. He said, Lord, I commit to you. You judge righteously.
Yeah, I love that point, because I think oftentimes we get so upset or offended or embarrassed, and we get indignant, and that could be kind of the pride of life. It's just like, well, you shouldn't treat me like I deserve this, and you should honor me, and you can't say that to me. And really, that's denying the flesh, taking up a cross.
Yeah, sometimes Jesus talked about bless those who curse you, pray for those who despitefully use you. Yeah. We don't preach a lot about that either. Hey, I'm guilty. I'm as guilty as the next guy.
Yeah, but I think it's something
that's a tough message.
And I think the message even today is like, hey, even when don't lash out if you lose.
Yeah, don't gloat if you win.
We have an opportunity as Christians to bring healing, and I think
to lead the way. And I love how you said it. Like it's not about proving you're right; it's about shining your light. Yeah, I thought that was.
I thought that was
a preacherism.
Solid. Could that be a book title? I don't know. Yeah. But I honestly agree. It's like so many times people feel like I got to be right. It's like, is it about?
Yeah, you could.
Is it about being right or getting it right?
Well, and it's a good point. And the thing too is, You can prove you're right and win the battle and lose the war. And this is what happens so often because people, man, someone says something, they lash back out, or they gloat when they win. It's like, hey, who's crying now and all this thing. You might have that word, and you've lost the war. So you really have closed the door. The Bible talks about, I think it's talked about a brother offended is harder to be won than like a walled city.
Yeah.
So the walls go up. So you offend somebody, make them mad, the walls go up. So then you're like, hey, come to church for Easter. They ain't coming with you. No, they're angry at you.
Or family that God, and maybe God's called you to reach them, and
Or at least be a witness to them.
yeah, as we are judged on everything that we do, and so there's an element of like, hey, we want to make sure we're treading carefully.
Yeah.
Really great. Is there anything you wish that you could have said that you didn't, or anything that you would like to say?
No, it was pretty quiet.
Yeah.
It was pretty quiet. This is one of those think about messages.
No. Well, I talked to a guy afterwards, and he was like, all right, I was guilty of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
like,
yeah. Well,
and he's like, I got to be careful. He's like, it's easy for me on Facebook and just I lay into people,
But if people
behind the wall.
If people can get a hold of, I'm still the church.
Yeah.
I'm the church. It's not that I go to the church. It's not Alan represents the church. It's I am the church.
Yeah.
And if I am the church, then I need to lead the way here. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. And so as believers, we're the light of the world. We're the salt of the earth, the light of the world. We're here not to be, and listen, in our family, we're verbally, very few of us are lacking.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, if you come to a Sunday lunch, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of correction,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
a lot of strong opinions.
Totally.
It's not for the faint of heart.
and we can go snarky.
Yeah.
And I've had a tendency in the past to go very snarky, very sarcastic. And so I even did
I
it.
haven't.
I even you're a liar. I even did it today when I said only in New York City. So that was that there's snarkiness. But the idea is if we understand who we are, we understand what we represent. I think it can help us push past that. Mission supersedes everything else.
Awesome. All right, I appreciate it. That was a great message. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. This was great for me. And go back, watch or listen.
Because he's way too snarky.
I had to watch my.
Duh.
My sarcasm's probably
The worst.
It's
the worst.
It's not the worst.
It's horrible.
Really great. It can be very funny sometimes.
All right, man.
All right.
We love you.
Thank you.
We're praying for you.
We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye.